Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome. Yes, we have before us panelists. Actually, we have 9 contributors and participants in this conversation regarding the decolonization of African education systems through historical and contemporary African political and social thought. Because this is a very critical issue, because the colonialists, they found colonizing the mind in a way easier and cheaper, and they could sell it very well, and they did it very well. So the process of decolonization of the mind is very important. And I remember the late President Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere used to say, the attitude of mind is critical as Africans. Whether we decolonize the mind or we don't, hangs the very success or failure of the recolonization process. So we are very glad and very happy. We have a very distinguished panelists here with us. I think I'm going to take the plunge and try to pronounce their names again. I apologize for those that I will mispronounce. But we have Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Head of College of Humanities, University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. We've been with him this morning. Then we have Professor Nkondo, who is the member of the National Heritage Council, South Africa. Then we have Professor Lesiba Tifo, who is from the School of Transdisciplinary Research Institutes, College of Graduate Studies, University of South Africa. Then we have Inkosi Chiliza, the chairperson, KwaZulu-Natal Provincial House of Traditional Leaders, and Professor Faith Ruffin, Associate Professor, School of Management, IT and Governance, College of Law and Management Studies, University of KwaZulu-Natal. Then we have Dr. Ntoba, former Deputy Dean of Students, University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. We have Ms. Jane Mufamadi, Chief Executive Officer of Freedom Park, South Africa. We have Ashaterwa Ngidi, Director Institute of Africology, South Africa. She's not here yet. And we have Ms. Lebongang Shaka, Chairperson of the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute, South Africa. So, as I've said, we are very lucky to have these distinguished panelists with us, but given the constraints of time and that we want to have a conversation, really, would we expect each one of them to talk with us initially for maybe at least 6 to 7 minutes, and then we'll go to the audience, and then we can come back to the panels in a back and forth to have this conversation. So without much further ado, I start with Professor Mkhize is not yet here. No? And yes, let me start with Professor Nkondo, please.
Well, thanks very much, Chair, and I want to thank the organizers of this dialogue for bringing together some of the best minds on the continent. Just to commend particularly Professor Khaya for his sustained leadership on a topic so complex and so strategic. Just 3 questions, because we are not here to read papers, but to ask questions and to organize conversations around these questions. But just to let you know that because this is a rare audience and a rare reading public. I've prepared a monograph on these questions, which is available. Those of you who want it, is in the system. But today I want to just pose 3 questions. The first question is that I think at time we have been having these conferences now since 1960. Some of us are old enough. We've been having these conferences since 1960. We have seen Pan-Africanism take various articulations. We have seen it take the form of back to Africa. We have seen it take the form of African personality, African humanism, African is socialism. We have seen it take the form of negritude, of authenticity, of Ujamaa, of back to basics. We have seen it take the form of non-racial, non-sexist society. These are the various articulations of Pan-Africanism. But I think a time has come, colleagues, for us to have a comprehensive and integrated assessment of the impact of Pan-Africanist thought on our politics and our economics. It's important for us to have a comprehensive and integrated impact assessment of these thinkings over time. We shouldn't continue just revising and refining theories without a concrete socio-economic analysis of its impact. I want to suggest that it happens. Why have we not been able to put in practice some of the best ideas that have come in the last 60 years? If you look at our performance, state after state, we haven't begun to achieve even a quarter of the best ideas that have come from Pan-Africanist thought in the last years. So why? I think we should be able to be honest to ourselves. Who is answerable? Who is accountable? What went wrong? The second question that I want to pose is that, African thought is respected universally for its depth in comprehending the principles that should shape our human relations. Almost all the traditions now in the world respect Ubuntu as a paradigm for human relations. They're the same. So Africa's contribution to moral wisdom, to ethics, is highly respected in the world. And if in fact the word Ubuntu appears even in the complete English Oxford dictionary, that's how highly respected that is. But why is it that there is no equivalent for Ubuntu philosophy in the management of nature's forces? Why has there not been a translation of these profound principles into how to manage energy, how to produce better food, how to make better use of water? I've just been reading that in the history of Africa, no single state has managed to build a single city. All the cities in Africa have been built by Western technology to serve Western interests. Why the disjuncture between moral wisdom and science and technology? There's a disjuncture there. The genius of the Enlightenment, all its imperfections, that the 4 revolutions were not just revolutions in science and tech, but they were there to articulate certain human ideas about how the world should be organized, how the world should be managed, but using science and technology to promote certain ideas. That congruence, you don't find in the history of African thought. Why is it so? Which leads me to the third question. When we talk about the need now to integrate all knowledge systems, move away from the hegemony of Western epistemology, we are trying to say a time has come now for us to test in practice the capabilities that are available in African scientific. We are not trying to theorize about its authenticity, its integrity. We are saying that in practical terms, what kind of capabilities would we derive from African science and technology? Because that has not been tested. All the Enlightenment philosophers from Descartes to Habermas, all of them dismiss African science as not a domain of knowledge, all of them. And that even today, in every African state, Western epistemology is still very hegemonic. In spite of the various versions of Pan-Africanism, we have not been able to disrupt that epistemology. Why? That is my third question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I will talk very, very briefly, maybe to two issues on this subject of decolonization. The first issue that I want to talk to is the decolonization of the mental health care system. How can we have a mental health care system that is completely decolonized? How can we infuse this decolonized mental health care system into the entire curriculum across the board, from the primary level to the tertiary level? Now, as you will all be aware, mental health and well-being is very, very important. And yet, in the current paradigm or ways of doing things that we have, mental health as well as health in general is not considered to be something that you are entitled to by virtue of being a human being. Maybe it is so in theory, but in actual practice, mental health and mental well-being in general is something that you are going to buy. So from an indigenous knowledge system, we proceed from the premise that everyone is deserving of mental health and well-being independently of their status. Whether they are poor, whether they are rich, whether they are in the rural areas, whether they are in the urban areas. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, mental health is one of the major challenges we are having in the country. I can give an example. It's very, very easy to pronounce judgment. If you open an ordinary newspaper in Durban, most likely on a weekly basis, you will learn about a young woman who has abandoned her infant. We are very quick to pronounce judgment without really looking into what were some of the complex mental health issues that may have led a mother, people with a caring ethic, to abandon their children. It's because of mental health issues. So if we were to decolonize our systems, decolonize the mental health care system, decolonize the healthcare system, we have to look into models of healthcare that are implemented, which says it is the well-being of the entire community that is at stake, and not just the well-being of the individual by virtue of their ability to buy health care. Now, where does this lead us if we were to have a decolonized system that looks into the health of our people as a whole? This is a major problem. Very, very soon, schools, work, organizations, institutions will be very, very difficult to function merely because of mental health issues. From where we are standing, it is very, very important to decolonize the healthcare system by integrating the wisdom of Africa into the healthcare system. And that can only commence and proceed by having a genuine conversation with those whom we call the healers. I'm not going to call them traditional healers because they don't call themselves as such. They are just the healers. And what does the healer do? They heal the community. In terms of implementations, what are some of the models that we have in terms of this form of integration? I'm going to mention one example again that we have in the university, whereby we have introduced many modules or courses that talk to indigenous healing. Not only do those courses take place at the university level, but we take our students and learners to receive instructions in the villages of the healers, in vindication of our belief that the university needs to be decentralized if we were to be a decolonized institution. So we take our learners for the whole day or longer, they receive instruction in the healing village. This is a partnership that we have with Umsamo Institute here in KZN, which is under the leadership of Dr. Mkhize and other traditional healers in the province. So, ladies and gentlemen, decolonization also entails the decolonization of our mental well-being, and in order to heal our villages, in order to heal the violence that we see in the communities, people vandalizing schools, we need to approach it holistically by tapping into indigenous knowledge systems. Thank you.
Dumelang, Jambo, Sanbonani, Molweni. I will deviate from the topic of the conference in a sense, but still speak to the topic. Francis Bacon said, knowledge is power. And somebody visited my village one day and said to me, in education lies the future of any country. But then as I thought, what is he talking about? Then another one said to me, you know what, let me remind you. In Africa, those who have ideas don't have power. And those who have power don't have ideas. But at least one speaker this morning made you realize the importance of knowledge and the importance of having both power and knowledge. And that's the president of Ghana, Mr. Mahama. If you have it that way, you'll get it right. Listen to him speak. Where it was necessary, he took the lead and ensured there were material changes that impacted the country and the continent as a whole. That's the first point I wanted to talk to. The second point speaks to the organizing of this conference, the way it is set up for me. If we can do it this way, we'll go a long way. We have been talking for far too long, some of us, right? But if it is structured in this format, intergenerational dialogue with the elders, it will have more impact than when we just try to dish out either on the television, in the radio, or in the pamphlets, or even in academic papers. One thing I would recommend Professor Kaya for tomorrow is that it would have been more profound for me that the young ones who are here were also given an opportunity to go and see what is happening in the Center of Excellence, Indigenous Knowledge Systems. It would have supplemented what we shall have shared or what we are sharing with them here. And above all, even the visitors who are here, many of them are not aware of the good things that are being done at the center at this university on indigenous knowledge systems. And those who are from Northwest, please visit the Mafikeng campus. Some of us have gone beyond the rhetoric. We are at the level of application, both in discourse and even in literature. We are writing, we are publishing. For those who come from outside the country, some of us in this house were responsible for writing a qualification that is now accredited and is being taught on Bachelor of Indigenous Knowledge Systems. That's how far we have gone in now trying to implement and to actualize the history of ideas on the African continent. The third point is the young lady said to us, yes, how do we go forward? Because we tried to put up a library and they ban it. You remember that statement? Yeah. It's a very profound statement. Those who were around on the eve of deposing Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, you will recall exactly what was happening in the Tahrir Square. But one little incident captured my mind to date. There was a community that realized overnight that there was a certain library around Alexandria, not the Alexandria Library, but around Alexandria. When the people were marching towards that space, they found that there was a human shield. And the leader said, you can ban anything you please, but certainly not a library. It talks to the mental development of the people in that space. Ban anything you like, but don't ban a library. You remember the Timbuktu, what happened there? The books were banned and so on. But what I appreciated also, the man behind that, who was a curator, said, please punish me. I should not have taken the lead in the banning of those books. Because he appreciated the value of scholarship, the value of education. In education lies the future of any country. We can shout as much as we please, but that is the source. Japan, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, 1945, demolished, but they gave themselves 41 years and they said, we shall lead the world. And Japan is the leader of the world. How many years old? About 50 years old or so? Yes, because they put a high premium on education. As I tape out towards a close, maybe let me just remind you of what D.H. Lawrence once said to me in my village in Mokopane. Men fight for liberation with hard knocks, tears and sweat, and get it. But their children, raised easy, they let it slip out of their hands. Fools, poor fools, and their grandchildren are slaves again. And I think it was Amil Cabral who said, each generation must, out of its own obscurity, identify its mission or betray it. In education lies the future of any country. It was President Mahamba who said to me this morning, they know how to treat a broken bones of an animal. And I said, but I heard about something about this in my village. African orthopedics. I'm sure most of you know about that. You wouldn't just slaughter a beast because it has got a broken leg. Where has that knowledge gone to? How can we retrieve, preserve, promote, and protect that knowledge before the holders of that knowledge disappear from the surface of the earth? Because some of them are already on the transit lodge. Professor Nkondo, I'm not referring to you. And lastly, yes, Professor Kaya, those who are of the Catholic tradition, they know St. Augustine, who said, catch them young. If you want to get them into the monastery to become the priests and to serve humanity, catch them young. If indeed we are to make a difference, I think we have made a good start by getting the young ones here. Let's invest in them so that the little that we know, it is passed on. Chair.
Thank you, Program Director. His Excellency, the former President of Ghana, the Deputy Mayor, various academics, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the House of Traditional Leaders in this province, first and foremost is to thank the organizers of such important gathering, because to us, we always ask ourselves, where does we go wrong? The reason of that question is that when we all being happy that there is democracy, we're fighting for democracy, we forget who we are. Angibingelele kumzukulu umntwana okwaphinda ngene okhona lapha phakathi kwethu. Ukuba khona kwakho lapha wena weqhawe kubalekile. Because we are where we are, because we lost somewhere somehow. Thank you, Prof. With your colleagues, for all what you are doing to try to ensure that we go back to basics. When I grew up as a young boy, unfortunately I grew up in a vast area of Emadungeni. It's a deep rural area where there is no clinic. Even the school was only primary school then. But what I know is that the respect, basis of respect, where a child, there was nothing that this is my child. A child was a child of a community. I think when we start to ukungena kwalento ye democracy, thina ke sikhulele emakhaya, when you grow up in rural areas, there was this thing istambu. If udle istambu singavuthiwe, samba siqumbele phakathi kwabantu, ayikuzwakala ukuthi hayi istambu simqumbele. So today we are here and support the organizers of such important gathering, because it take us back to basics, and especially to young people. Funa nizwe ngami bantu abami ngoba lezi zinto ziyahlupha uma soloko sifuna ukuzikhuluma ngeindlela ezithile. Once you fail uqinisekisa ukuthi before ufune ukuba enye into, start by understanding yourself. Who are you? Then you will reach where you want to go to. Enye into esilimaze kakhulu, Prof, ile yokuthi sifuna ukuzenza into esingeyiyo. Kuthe makufika idemocracy not eSouth Africa, eAfrica, then we start thinking ukuthi konke kuzolunga. Even the Bible, uThixo uqobo uthi usiza lo uyisizayo. That's what we are doing here. We are assisting ourselves, trying to find out who are we. But ikakhulu, the problem that we are facing, especially to academics, you know, to the lawmakers of our country in Africa, let's go back and check where do we go wrong. Because we're facing these challenges because of the laws. Let me make an example. We're talking about poor of the poorest people from the rural areas. And we're in a democracy. We're saying, no, we'll build houses for the poor of the poorest people. When you go to these rural areas, you start to introduce policies, Eurocentric, two Eurocentric policies. That says, hey, Koko, you qualify to have a house, but we can't build you a house here. Move to a certain space where the policy say it's a suitable space. And this old lady has been there for 50 years. Let's go back and look, if we're talking about Africanism, let's deal with our policies. Thank you.
I have a view that maybe this forum is a bit Eurocentric, because normally, and being a leader just below the Inkosi here, because I'm an Induna, normally I don't speak after him. When he has spoken in the African setting, then I don't have to speak. But because of the nature of our forum, then I'll have to speak. Because this is speaking about the theme of this conference, I think here the main theme, the overriding theme, is to revive and restore the dignity of the African people. But we are looking at it in this panel in the context of education. I just want to give an example. I think at my age, again, you tend to refer to the past. The reason being that at my age, you would have done certain things that you want to refer to. But fortunately, you are able then to escape being innovative. At UKZN, when I came in there to work with the students, as my title suggests in the program, obviously, and as we all know, it used to be called the University of Natal, highly westernized, elitist, and obviously Eurocentric. Looking at the plight of the students who were going to counselors, and counselors could not help because they had something African, in my view, in terms of their problems that needed an African solution. I then introduced a thing which I called then indigenous healthcare system or subsystem within the student services. And I do remember one top academic, in fact, she was at a level of DVC. Of course, not me, Professor Mkhize, because Professor Mkhize is in full support of what we did then. She said to me, you see, Professor Makgoba is a biomedical scientist. He may not like what we are doing. Then my answer to her was that, well, if Prof. Makgoba is an African, he has got to give me some space. And secondly, if UKZN is anchored on African scholarship, so be it. I'm doing what the vision of the institution is saying. Incidentally, after 2 years, Professor Makgoba called me and gave me his blessing regarding the nature, or rather the project as such. And the project is still in existence even today, successively demanded by the students. But I dare say with due respect to my university, that till this day, and it's worrying, the university has not been able to rock the boat by fully accepting this. It is still a project even today, yet in 2009, I evaluated its efficacy, and it was found by independent researchers as the project. And subsequently, I addressed the entire student services staff in the entire university system down at Karadino Hotel, and they all applauded our initiative, but none of them has been able to think of introducing it. Then the question is, where is the problem? Maybe I need to say in passing that sometimes we need to start with ourselves and begin to establish whether we are true to these kinds of initiatives. I often say this, and quite unashamedly, that it often happens that as academics, we learn many Western books, obviously, and even if we try to liberate ourselves, we still have that white man lingering around our minds. And that is the problem, quite frankly. Now, I'm happy to be talking to students because I've dealt with them for quite a number of years. And in dealing with them, we are dealing with the future of this country. And it's very motivating to see them here and to see them listening to or taking part in this forum, and therefore we being able to interact with them. And I want to give them homework. By the way, I was a teacher, and I want to give you homework. This is your homework. Just go and define for yourself, individually, what is African dignity. Just go and define that. You can research about it, but you must provide an answer, because we need to be able to say what it is that we're talking about. Once we refer to African dignity, what is it that can be said to be the dignity of the African people? That is your homework. There is one learner who made reference to where do we start, in a way. I just want to point out that for you to begin to come into grips with this whole topic of decolonization, I think you need to start from ancient Egypt. Yes. That is where you should start. And fortunately, you still have the time, because we are still young, and we are still going to be able to read if you find time to read. And when you find time to read literature on African, or rather on ancient Egypt. Some call it Kemet. For instance, there are certain things, I'm just saying this in passing, there are certain things that we're able to keep all the way down from ancient Egypt to where we are today. E.g., as Prof. Etifo said, Ubuntu. Ubuntu is something ingrained in us, and we also learn that even the 10 Commandments, so-called, come from Ubuntu. It comes from us. It is part of us as Africans. Respect. Respect doesn't mean being naive or cringing. It is just something inherent in us as Africans. Ubukhosi, for instance, I'm saying this quite cautiously, because somewhere along the line, people tend to confuse the whole notion of Ubukhosi. Now, Ubukhosi, it's something that we came down with all the way from the north. That is why we respect Ubukhosi. When Inkosi is around us, there's a particular way of behaving that we demonstrate as a way of saying, this is our institution, this is part of us. I can go on and on mentioning things that I think will better inform us about our current situation and the extent to which we have been able to carry them through till this day. Now, in winding up, in 1992, I was somewhere around the States, and there was too much violence in schools. And I just wondered, because we were talking about the future of this country in one forum there, and then the kind of violence which I saw in the States then is what we see today here in this country. Exactly. Beating up teachers and vice versa. Now, the question then I often pose is, what has gone wrong with us? Where is the problem? Do we still have intact families? Our school policies, in fact, our Inkosi has been able to slant the speaker of the COP in Afrikaans, saying exactly what is supposed to be said. That is, to what extent our educational policies responding to our situation, are they foreign to our situation, or they took into account our situatedness as indigenous people of this land? That's a question we need to begin to grapple with, whether the current education system, in fact, or whether we can decolonize it based on the current policies. What we see, therefore, in education is what I would call a real crisis that requires urgent intervention. There was reference to school vandalization, and I was reminded of what we do, because as an Induna, maybe I must explain this to other people. He's an Inkosi, I'm an Induna, I'm junior to him. But as an Induna, I've got my own area that I'm administering. We can't have this in my area, because we meet as a community and deal with whatever problem that arises, be it a family problem, a school problem. In fact, we think Inkosi and myself and others went to Folweni before elections in 2016, and we dealt with unrest there because it was affecting education. So we're to bring in an Inkosi, typically African solution. Well, when I talk about these things, let me stop here.
Thank you. I just want to make an observation that since this morning, the gender imbalance in the panels, at least this time, it's the two of us. Bomakazi are not represented. I want to talk about this in the context of the challenges that our governments in Africa are facing. The same issues around poverty, illiteracy, social services, health, and so forth and so forth. Because the expectation is that the intellectual and expert solutions to these challenges fall within the competencies of education and training to try and address this. And it seems that generally the current education systems do not fully serve the needs of local people or communities because our understanding is that the education system must define or engage and respond to these societal challenges. And therefore, the system must place people at the center of all endeavors. And also, if we talk the debate around the restructuring of the education system, I think it presents us with some opportunities to redefine actually what knowledge is in essence. How do we understand knowledge as Africans? And also the relationship that such knowledge bears within our own context. And also, I think to interrogate the very same term, education, our notion and understanding of what education is. Because Mankomo, Gogonkomo is sitting there in the audience, and Mama Suku, some of the elders I work with, they always challenge me about the difference between going to school and being educated. They always talk about going to school as attaining degrees that do not bring change to the communities, and being educated as using the knowledge you've learned to make a difference and impact. I think we need to begin to look at this and define what do we mean by education, and actually who's educated. Is it because I've got degrees? Is it because of what I do based on the knowledge that I have? And obviously we do know that we need to develop an education system that facilitates the process of forging a strong identity and a national consciousness. And I also believe that the education system can excel and attain international standing, particularly if it encourages learners to first take pride in their own identities and have the confidence to find unique niches which they can use for competitive advantage. I do believe that if I'm competing from my own knowledge and culture with anybody, nobody can beat me in any endeavor. So that we start to associate excellence in education, not linking it with imitation or mimicry, but with innovation and understanding of the context. You find sometimes learners doing experiments, trying to reproduce an experiment that somebody did and just to confirm, instead of coming and doing new experiments to come up with solutions to current challenges, so that we begin to use education to be innovative. And also, I do believe that it is through education that values, cultural norms, and beliefs and practices of a society can be reproduced, because the curriculum and the education in particular shapes the mindset of the population to sustain a particular ideological imprint. So the question is, which ideology are we promoting through the current education? I think it was Professor Mkhize who also talked about the separation, where we have to, what the learners learn at school is different from what they learn. There is no consistency and continuity. What they learn at home and what they learn at school. That relationship and synergy, I believe, needs to be encouraged so that there is that coherence. I love, I've worked a lot with Abogogo. Thanks to Professor Sodi there, when he introduced what we call indigenous therapeutic systems. I did psychology, so I was always fascinated with several theories of personalities, Maslow, Carl Rogers, and then looking at indigenous therapeutic systems, because my challenge with psychology, Professor Mkhize, has always been some of the techniques that you are taught to deal with a patient are very Western. And if I'm dealing with my grandmother, some techniques will not work because it's against the culture. And elders, there are certain things that they will not do. I mean, even outside psychology, there are certain practices. Other people believe that to show that I'm honest and respectful, I must look you in the eyes. But certain cultures, if I'm talking to the elders, I can't look them directly. I have to bow down a bit. That's a sign of respect, not of dishonesty. So that incongruence needs to be addressed, because what values then are our learners learning at school? Whose value systems are we teaching and encouraging? And with Professor Mkhize spoke about issues around health. And again, I'm always fascinated with Bogogo. If they're asking you to go and get medication or the herbs, There's specific instructions that they will give you. For example, they will tell you that, without going into the details, you will only harvest this plant where this animal has grazed. You don't just harvest anywhere. There's specific instructions. Only harvest this plant after this other one has shed its leaves, for example. Why? Because it's just a plant. I think we need to begin to do this. If you're digging some roots, for example, you only dig this root that is facing towards the river, towards sunrise. It's very specific instructions. I wonder if most of us as academics really question the rationale behind the philosophy. Why not just any plants at any time? Some you will told, do this in the evening, for example. I think it's time that we begin to question the lessons and the education and the value system, because I believe it is very important. And yes, there are many developments, particularly with medicines, our indigenous medicines, to try and popularize them. But we need to be careful what methodologies are we not then compromising the value system and the knowledge embedded in the process and the manner in which we are promoting this. Have we consulted the experts, the professors who knows better in these fields, how to do it and how to go about it, so that we are guided? So these are some of the challenges. And again, the other example that maybe one needs to talk about, which was alluded to this morning, the separation or the so-called formal education, which is our school systems, but the informal, which is our institutions, as Professor Sorote will call them, our rites of passages, the initiation schools, because if you look, our people were very thoughtful. If I'm using my own Venda culture, we have about 6 or 7 schools. You start when you're young, you're socialized, and it's intergenerational, always. If I go to Msebeto, there is Badabe. Badabe are those who were initiated before. I'm with my peers, but there is a group that has been there, and also the elders are there. Every school is like that, and it is within the schools that some of the values are taught. There is a criticism on our African cultures that we don't talk to our children about certain subjects, like sex, for example, because these schools were actually intended for that. So when we do away with these school systems, the question is, does the formal education then replace and integrate those values that they were taught there? Because these schools have now been devalued. So these are some of the challenges that, as we talk about decolonizing education in Africa, we need to look at whose education and whose value systems are we promoting through our educational systems. And I think those are some of the issues that I just wanted to say. As we talk about decolonization, we need to look at whose methodologies, whose approach, whose knowledge systems, for what and for who. What is the intention? Is it just to attain our degrees? It is just to go to be poached by the UK? Or is it to bring the difference and impact in our, and how do then our young people learn about the value systems, their cultures, so that they become patriotic, proud Africans from the education itself, not from the media? Because it seems, if you look at, I was listening to one of the learners, you will think that they think that what you learn at school is different from what you should learn at home. It shouldn't be. There should be some synergy in terms of the process and the knowledge and the value systems and chain. So I just thought I should just share those to say the challenge, therefore, I believe, as I sit down, is to champion Africanness and African scholarship to a wider world, while at the same time continuing to educate and develop scholars who are critical, analytical, adaptable, and are also able to communicate and build their societies and the global body of knowledge, inspired by their own indigenous knowledge systems and value systems. Thank you.
Sanbonani, I'm just unfortunate that the students are leaving, because I really came here to speak to young people. I didn't come here to speak to old people. So I'm just saying that maybe I should differ because my story is one that young people need to understand what decolonization really means. So take a minute and sit because this is for you. At the age of 16, I was given a scholarship by the American government to study in a place called Denmark. When I arrived in Denmark, I was 17 years old. My father gave me two things because he never had money to give me. He said, as an African child, when you go out into the European world, remember two things. Don't be too sweet, they'll swallow you. Don't be too sour, they'll spit you out. I lived in Europe for 3 years. I never saw another black person because in those days in Denmark, we didn't travel out. I did what they called the excursions, and for 3 years I traveled Europe. Every summer, I was an au pair, a waiter in different parts of Europe. And on one very fortuitous day, I was in Geneva. I was 18 years old. And a white woman came up to me, and I had big afro. And she says, I always notice that, you know, you don't seem to fit in. And I was wondering, why is this Belungu observing me? What is her story? She says, do you know that the hair that you have represents your people from Egypt? And because I'd been taught in the Christian religion, Egyptians are demigods and should be hated because they destroyed Moses, or they ran out Moses and his people. And she gave me a book, and the book she gave me at the age of 18, Dabizita, was called Kemet and Nubia. I went home to read in that cold place because in Denmark, 8 months of the year, you sit inside, it's so cold. And I took 3 days to read that book, and I decided out of that knowledge that I did not just want to learn Scandinavian history, which is what I eventually did, and applied linguistics as my first degree. I wanted to know who I was. And so the decision had to be, do I go home and show the beautiful degree and form myself into the usual case that what happens after a degree, you run after a job because you have a degree? I decided I wanted to know more about these Kemetians, and I changed my course and went to Liverpool University to ask them, please, I would like to study about African studies. In 1990, there was no African studies program in Liverpool University. I was very lucky that at the age of 21, I went again back to Geneva to work in the UN as a United Nations volunteer, and from there I was given the offer to go to Kenya. I went to Kenya and I began to learn Kiswahili. I lived in Kenya for 4 years until I was sent to the country of my soul, which is Azania, South Africa. But I made two decisions on this decolonization. One, the minute I found out that in Kenya, women use their rappers to help fight the Mau Mau War, I decided that I'm gonna be wearing clothes for liberation. Because when the Mau Mau warriors were hiding in the bushes, the women would go for water and they would have the message on the back, but the British didn't know this. And there began my journey that everything I wore since 1994 to now has been made by Africans. I've never gone into a store to buy clothes. I also decided upon meeting the great Professor Nabuderi, may his soul rest in power, and the great indigenous knowledge teacher, Dr. Coker, Drake Coker. When they sat me in the garage and they said, we need more of you to be able to build this epistemology called Africology, I made a decision. Because you see, decolonization is not a systematic, and I'm glad my sister mentioned a few things there. Because we have to ask our question, what is this decolonization? Do you know the system that colonized you? And so one part of my Africology was that we are illogical, and so we have to go and study the system before we can undo it. The fact that you lived in the system don't mean that you understand the system, because some of us became herds. We just went with the flow. I was not one of them. And so I had to identify my mission and what it is that I was going to leave this generation with. And when I started having children in Soweto, I decided not to live where the UN was sending me to live in the northern suburbs. I lived in Dobsonville, Soweto, because I needed to immerse myself in the culture that I've found myself in. My children today speak isiZulu because in our house, you cannot wake up and greet Ubaba with good morning. Icon, it can't happen. And I am the mother who has the mother tongue in there, but the isiZulu is what they come from. Today, our home is in Matlongwa because, you see, if you're gonna tell people to decolonize, start with yourself first. And so in decolonization, this elephant of decolonization is not about just education. It's about the spirituality. It's about the decision that you make 7 days of the week. You're buying everything from everybody else and not one thing from an African. You show up in a Pan-African event and everything that you have on you, and I'm not gonna judge, but I'm saying consciously you think, today is the day I can actually go crazy in my African self and wear whatever I am, because guess what? This is the space I can be free to do it. But Dololo, we come here because we think we're in London. I wanna say this to the young people. I built Africology. It is now 22 years old. I have received accolades around the world, but my greatest accolade, apart from being the wife of a very great Zulu man, apart from being a Zulu Makoti, the greatest achievement I feel in decolonization has to be, which the Kemetans told us in Egypt, know thyself. And in knowing thyself, you're gonna have to be deliberate about your family tree, good and bad. But you need to give your children a sense of where they come from, what they have achieved, not just the victimization of the story. Because the problem with decolonization is that we only want to talk about what was done to us. We don't talk about resistance. We have in the decolonization story a story of women resisting being colonized. And so that's the kind of discussion that the next 2 days must begin to ask. What are we decolonizing from? And what do we understand to have been the system that has brought us to this bedrock? There's an opportunity, though, with 5 principles. Maulana Karenga, when he came back from Tanzania, Dr. Karenga went back to the Western world and he says, don't worry, I found in Tanzania 7 principles. Because you see, we can talk about values, and everybody in here has their own personal values and their own collective values, but until the decolonization effort has a few values and principles that everyone can speak to, we're gonna be running like the salmon up the stream. And let me continue. Nguza Saba asked us to look at the principle of umoja, because if we're not unified around, and I'm gonna be doing this in Kiswahili and English, if we are not unified around umoja, if that is not our own purpose to be unified, then we are already defeated. Kuji Chakulia means self-determination, to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. That is decolonization. Ujima, collective work and responsibility is about building and maintaining our communities and make our brothers and sisters' problems our own, and most importantly, to solve our problems together. Imani asks that we have faith, to believe in our heart that you children, when we have given you the Agenda 2063, believe in your people, believe in your continent, believe in your parents, believe in your teachers, believe in the leaders, but also believe that this struggle, this liberation that we are now handing over to you is righteous. Ujama, to build and maintain our own shops, stores, and other business and to profit from them. We are tired of people coming on stages to say, look at the Indians, why are we looking at them? When we have a creative industry that we can buy from ourselves, we can build our own. The last one, the 6th principle is Nia. Every African has a purpose, and our purpose must feed into the collective vocation of nation building. Everyone must know your purpose, and we must support it. Kumba means that we must always do as much as we can in any way we can, and always to leave our community, to leave our spaces better than we got them. we have to believe that this decolonization effort is a tip of the iceberg. We have to believe that it is in each and every effort that we make here today that's gonna undo the education system that has been given to us, which is very low standard. Our spirituality that has been taken away from us, that today we're not allowed to burn in paper in our own offices because it's not done, you go and hide in a corner. We have to believe that our language has value and it has currency and we can use it no maganjan. Siabong.
Okay, that was Africology. Yeah, and I'm sure you got some disciples, converts here. Thank you very much. Okay, good people. I think you've had a lot of ideas, very good, profound ideas from the panel. So we are now open for questions, for additions, for comments. Please. Yes.
Africology. Yeah, Shantiwa knows me well. I wanted to ask, in terms of traditional leaders, back in the days, kingdoms and all of that used to be, they used to consult traditional leaders and get wisdom from ancestral guides on who is to go next and what are righteous people to take critical positions. It feels to me that governance on a modern scale has completely ignored all the Tanusis and traditional leaders and those who are the wisdom keepers of the world who can really help channel the right people into the right positions. So where did that end, and can we go back to that in some kind of way where people like Vusamazulu, Credo Mutwa and such, that those kind of knowledges can be put into governments where decisions can be made? And lastly, I don't have much, but what I'm trying to do in terms of make this a reality is I use music. And I record speeches like this here, and I take snippets of the speeches, wise words, and then I incorporate them with music, especially African music, whether it's instrumental or jazz. So because I believe that sound is critical to engaging the inner ear, especially the spiritual ear. And the eyes can be fooled, the mind can be fooled, but the ear, once you have heard, you have heard. So the music that I do and I'd love to go to school and I'd love to get a bursary and do all of these things, but I'm doing it now through my DJing and through events whereby I spread knowledge through topics like this and others that I record on YouTube and stuff, and incorporated with music such as Salif Keita kind of music, where I take different music from all over the world and I use that to present it to people who I'm playing with, whereby it's not just music for entertainment, but you're learning at the same time. But at the same time, the kind of music I'm using is stimulating your inner ear, so that when you hear a phrase being repeated in that song, you might go Google and be like, okay, this guy, like John Henry Clark, for example, was being looped in this song. And then you go and you Google yourself, and that's how I spread out information instead of bombarding you. So I'm doing something, even though I don't have much, but I believe that I will get there. And I really do believe what Ubaba spoke about mental health. Maya knows a lot about that, where I went through, and I honestly believe that I would not have gotten to where I am now, of knowing exactly what it is I want to do in my life without going through the struggles of mental struggles. So everything has a time and purpose and destiny. The only thing is that, are you brave enough to be who you'll be tomorrow? Are you willing to suffer today if you had a glimpse of who you can be tomorrow?
I have a comment and a question. Colonization did have resistance. There was resistance to colonization. But there is also resistance to decolonization, both from within and without. You see, if you talk of decolonization, you are trying to wipe out the history of the elite. And that's the only history they knew. Decolonization to the colonized, we, means that you are asking us to unlearn what we have learned many, many years ago. You're asking this professor to start a new way of teaching, developing modules on indigenous knowledge system which he doesn't know, because that's not what he was taught. But also, even to students who are spearheading it, the method of delivery of the program is going to change. You might be required to be in the village for 6 months. They are not used to living in the village. They are not being used to be taught by the Magogo. They are not being used to be taught by the healers in the village. So there is a lot of resistance that is going to be put on us when you are doing this process of decolonization. But also, decolonization involves a number of things. You are decolonizing the curriculum. You are decolonizing the mind. The professors who have been taught by the colonial system, and you want them to change. You are decolonizing the practice, the way you deliver the curriculum, which means a whole lot of things to learn. You are decolonizing the context. So it's really going to be quite a challenge to do it. It can be done, but expect resistance. My question, since 2016, when Roads Must Fall started and My Curriculum is White started, what progress have the universities made vis-a-vis decolonization?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cyril Tatai. I'm from Mahikeng in the Northwest Province, the town of Solplaki, Ngagamudri Mulema, and Dikmuntsiwa. I'm the founder of Maftown Book Club with the assistance of my mentor, Lawrence Mudimukwane, which is a Pan-Africanist, it's biased to the Pan-Africanist agenda, and some of the books that we have read for the past 10 months, Mhudi by Solplaki, where we try to understand the land question, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, and Men of the People, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Devil on the Cross. So we're trying to understand decolonization, the history of decolonization, literature post the colonial era. But I think one profound question that we have not answered is the role of the media in perpetuating racial stereotypes about African people. And why is it that in our media space we are unable to see stories and the history of Africans, which is biased to the Pan-Africanist agenda? And I'm saying this because I was the journalist for the SABC for close to 10 years. Now, when you go and sell a story in any media house, when you come from a rural province like the Northwest, the editor will ask you, and interestingly, the editors were, I don't want to sound insensitive, but they were Indians and white. They will ask you, so Cyril, so what do you have from the Northwest? Then I'll say, then they will set the agenda. They will say, any protests? No, we don't have protests. Any leader who has been accused of corruption in the ANC? No, we don't have that. Any unrest at Marikana or at the Platinum Belt? No, we don't have that. So what do you have? No, we've got a PhD student who has just recently graduated in science and is 24 years old. I went, no. Take it to Kids News.
Okay, it's very interesting, but please.
Yes. So we need to come up with ways and strategies that can help us through the media to advocate for the Africa we want to see. Even in DSTV and NESPAS, which is owned by NESPAS, and we know the history about NESPAS, the framing of African stories leaves much to be desired, including Daily Sun. Now, let me just, my part in short. Now, there was a headline on Daily Sun which was saying, the Tokoloshi gave me HIV. The question was, who tested the Tokoloshi? So our stories as African people have been reduced into some gimmick, and we need to really think beyond how we consume what is being fed to us and come up with alternative ways on how we can set our own agenda as Africans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All protocol observed. There was Samalink here again. I stand with a different, may I say, with a dichotomy. I am a product of what was a colonizer. I'm a product of an African. I have married a Zulu. I need to teach my children their roots. Their roots include the Dutch. They include the Indian. What do I teach my children, and how do I teach them to be proud of not only their roots in Africa, but those roots in Holland? Because that is still their roots. They need to still stand tall and walk tall, that is their part of their roots. I would like to know, as a mother, what kind of teaching I would have, because that is something I've struggled with. I still struggle with. People keep asking me, but kanti teboho, Samalink, haruklusis. The fact that you even speak, it doesn't sit well with some people. I think I've got my point across.
Let me just, that's a question I tried in my stumbling way to address. And I'm going to make this statement, and this statement only today. That, to me, is the heart of the problem. What we call Zulu, or Xhosa, or colored, or Indian, is not a natural identity, but a construction of modern history. Attached to us are these meanings that keep on changing. Okay? We can talk about it tomorrow when we deal with African literature. The second point that I want to make very briefly, we have been raised through the Enlightenment and through apartheid in the anthropology of oppositional differences. That to be a Zulu and to be a Tsonga, these are opposites. They are in fact antagonistic to each other. That is the Cartesian epistemology. I think, therefore I am. We are saying we think, therefore we are. So I'm saying that, and the only way to do that is to begin very early in child rearing processes. So when you move outside your yard and meet somebody who's taller, who's lighter, who's darker, they are not enemies. Difference is a place of possibilities. Difference is a place of opportunities where you can extend yourself beyond yourself to include other identities in the world. The third point I want to make is that, in 2004, the AU convened a conference. 500 intellectuals from Africa and the diaspora. 350 from Africa, 150 from the diaspora. We met in Dakar. 8 heads of state were there, including Gaddafi. They said, look, you intellectuals, how can you help government to bring about change on the continent? 500. We elected Wole Soyinka to be our spokesperson. Like Wole Soyinka, he harangued the heads of state. But when we settled down, there was agreement that we're going to form an executive committee that will consolidate and move with the AU on this question. Rather than 2004, we met for the first time. Ula Ishoenga refused to be our chairperson. So we started negotiating who was going to chair. The Francophones insisted it must be a Francophone chair. The Anglophones shot back. It must be an Anglophone. 15 years later, we have not met. A way of saying the challenge to Pan-Africanism is how to transform oppositional difference into complementary difference as a force for change. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question. In fact, as I said, we are facing a serious challenge because, as you said before, even in rural areas, in townships, wherever people live, if you are talking about governance, it was based to the community. Whatever decision is taken was taken by the community. Until such time, I think it's this thing of being Eurocentric, where decisions are taken somewhere and bring to the particular communities. It's where the problem we're facing today start. Uma sibuela esimweni sokuphila ngokwe tradition, even if we're talking about the justice system, there were no courts, no police station, nothing. And the level of crime during that time, there was no crime because everybody was responsible. Each and every member of a community was a governance. He or she knows what to do to ensure that there is peace, there is harmony. No one to do anything wrong depending to a government somewhere. If we can go back and use that system, we hope at least in our continent, we can have a peaceful and a prosperous countries. Thank you.
I'll be very brief. And if you recall, Oliver Tambo came from Pondoland. And I want to use an example very close to some of the people here, that the so-called collective thinking and decision-making in the ANC comes from Tambo's thinking, which he learned under the tree when Amakosi and Izinduna were taking decisions. So the brief answer is, in terms of decision-making, we as Africans are collective in nature. And there's nothing undemocratic about us, except that people don't know how we took decisions. Even an Inkosi would sit down and listen, and then take a decision informed by the collective. Thank you.
Yeah, I shouldn't speak after the two elders have spoken. But somebody might even argue that the chief doesn't take a decision. The chief articulates the decision arrived at through consensus. That's the position of African culture, African tradition. All right, that's fine. I just want to use my last minute of fame that I would have loved to use when the students were here. There is somebody, if I had thought I would ask her to stand up just for people to appreciate, especially the young ones. Madam Commander, can you say just in one line, because I think this is inspirational for us Africans, right? Your role right now in the Air Force. at least I can forgo my last minute of fame by saying, Madame said here something about education, that's education and certification. Of what consequence if your education, if it cannot at least change the material conditions of the people? That one day, when they pass by your grave, they doff their heads and take a bow and say, here is interred the bones of one who, once given a chance, made a difference in the life of his or her people. And I'm asking you as you leave, wherever you go, God be the agents of change in the context of renewing Africa, the regeneration of Africa. So that one day when you leave your office, you don't leave a vacancy, but you leave a legacy.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have been at the hands of great chefs. We have been served very tantalizing meals, and we are all full as we conclude this session. So please, let's put our hands together for our panelists. Yeah.